Hello, everybody. We're here at Mountain America Stadium following Arizona State's 30-23 victory over Mississippi State. ASU moves to 2-0 on the young season and gets its first victory over an SEC program. I'm Justin Lestertosa. Alongside myself is publisher Hode Rubino. And Hode, on the eve of the season opener against Wyoming, Kenny Dillingham sort of talked about he didn't really know how his team could handle adversity down the stretch of games, and that wasn't really a factor against Wyoming, of course, 48-7 victory, but maybe he got a little better of a sense of that in this game.
I would say a lot better of a sense, Justin. Look, the first half was definitely lopsided and reminded maybe a lot of fans of what happened against Wyoming, and a little surprising because obviously there's quite a step up in competition. By the way, Wyoming did lose to Idaho early on Saturday. Maybe that puts that win of ASU in perspective. Maybe it doesn't. But nonetheless, ASU was absolutely dominating against Mississippi State in the first half. Everything was clicking on offense, on defense. And I think that what happened in the second half, where Arizona State only scores 3 points, Mississippi State scores 20 points, yes, there was plenty of adversity to be had. And even though I think the team for the first quarter and a half did not handle that adversity all that well, down the stretch, the defense for some big stops, and obviously the offense controlling the clock and absolutely obliterating that Mississippi State defense, just like they did the entire first half, was really the story of the game. So this is obviously a very significant win for a lot of reasons, but I would say handling the adversity, answering that Kenny Dillingham question is definitely right up there in one of the biggest feats achieved on Saturday night.
Yeah, and in this game, we didn't necessarily see ASU air out the ball too much. Not much action from Sam Levitt in that regard, but this is another game where ASU's rushing attack sort of carried the offensive load. And should I say Cam Scatterbu, 262 yards, 33 carries on the night. A career game for Scat, and you really got to give him his credit.
And not only a career game for Scat, Justin, the second most ever rushing yards in ASU history. So I know some people were questioning, is Cam Scatterbu ready for the Big 12? Because, you know, up and down the conference, there are outstanding running backs in this conference. And Cam Scatterbu was nowhere to be mentioned when we're talking about the best running backs in the Big 12. I think after two games of this year, you can talk about a small sample size and all, but I think Cam Scatterbu absolutely deserves to be mentioned as one of the best running backs in the Big 12. That's an outstanding performance. When you look at those numbers, also averaging 7.9 yards a carry. And even though for the first, I would say, quarter and a half in the second half, when the whole offense was really struggling, even Cam Scatterbu was slowed down quite a bit. But at the end, to ice the game, who else would you call upon but Cam Scatterbu? And he did an outstanding job. Now, look, the wet blanket aspect over here on offense is the passing game. Sam Levitt definitely did struggle, 10 of 20, only for 69 yards. He did rush 11 times for 68 yards, so I think that's definitely a bright spot with Sam Levitt. But as much as we talked about the balanced offense absolutely killing Wyoming last week, that definitely was not the case tonight against Mississippi State. Now, sure, when your running game does collect a gaudy 346 yards, yeah, I guess you can really afford, so to speak, a slow night in the office when it comes to the passing game. And ultimately, and we need to remind this every time, Sam Levitt is a very young signal caller. There are going to be struggles. And even though this is not a menacing Mississippi State defense by any means, and they did face a three-man front, which you think would be susceptible to the run, which it definitely was, but also maybe decrease the number of opportunities for the opponent to record sacks, that made the passing game really could get more in rhythm. I thought Sam Levitt did struggle with some overthrows, maybe just incorrect reads, maybe not always being as decisive with his decisions. But this is a great learning tool. And as I always say, Justin, it is so much easier to fix mistakes after a win versus after a loss. So I would expect Sam Levitt to come back with a much better effort next week. And look, if you've got that insurance policy that's called Cam Scatterbu, or it's called the running game for ASU, you're going to take it any way you want it.
And Hode, we mentioned before the game that Mississippi State is a team that likes to play up-tempo, fast offense, very quick. And ASU's defense was really able to sort of put that to a halt and control that pace in the first half. Now, in the second half, Mississippi State's offense got back under its legs and found its rhythm, cut the lead to just 7 points. But, I mean, at the end of the game when it mattered most, ASU's defense once again stepped up.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, if we're talking about the very unbalanced performance that ASU had on offense, let's be fair. Mississippi State, it's really the same story, just in the reverse. Only 24 yards rushing, 268 yards passing by Blake Shapen, 18 of 28 for 2 touchdowns. So I think those are numbers that if you told Brian Ward, ASU's defensive coordinator, before the game, hey, this is what Blake Shapen is going to end up in the final box score, I think Brian Ward would gladly take that. So that did ultimately did spell really problems for this Mississippi State offense, which really wasn't able to be as explosive for entire fourth quarters. And one thing I need to mention also when it comes to the ASU offense and the ground attack specifically, ASU had over 40 minutes of possession. And if you recall the preview speech that Justin and I did a few days ago, what do we say? Every minute that ASU has the ball in offense, it is one fewer minute that a very explosive and a very fast Bulldog offense will have the ball on their end. And I think that really proved true quite a bit. Again, maybe more in the first half than the second half, but nonetheless, that is a huge feather in the cap for ASU. That is something they definitely wanted to accomplish coming into the game, and they accomplished that, and it really achieved it with flying colors. Now, I think there's a few things that we have to say about the defense. One thing that's probably within their control was the penalties. There were way too many penalty yards on defense. I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 just in the second half alone. That definitely killed the ASU defense. Now, let's face it, these refs are from the SEC. And, maybe we'll talk about the SEC being the best one in football play on the field. But when it comes to those guys in the zebra suits, I'm not so sure. I was having a lot of flashbacks of old Pac-12 refs tonight, seeing those SEC refs absolutely not giving ASU any home cooking whatsoever. But really, all jokes aside, I think there definitely were more than 1 or 2 questionable calls that went against ASU. Didn't matter in the end, but still was a little bugging, I'm sure, for the sideline for ASU. One thing that definitely wasn't within their control, Justin, was really the mounting injuries in the defensive line. Jeff Clark, defensive tackle, wasn't even dressed, was not even here in the stadium. Zach Swanson, defensive tackle. Jacob Kangaka, defensive tackle. Both were injured during the game. We'll see what the severity of those injuries are. I think that, again, we talk about the element of adversity. Sure, the offense dealt quite a bit with it because only scored 3 points in the second half, but the defense dealt with it quite a bit too, because I felt they weren't able to get really a lot of push, especially up in the middle against Mississippi State. Although Blake Shapen had a lot more time to throw the ball in the second half than he did the first half, and even though the running game was obviously quiet for the entire game, it definitely did come to life somewhat in the second half. But again, just like you give the offense credit for coming up big down the stretch, give the defense credit too. They had plenty of aspects that were going against them, and they did come up when it mattered the most. I said to a lot of people after the game, Justin, this is a contest that ASU absolutely does not win in 2023. Period. End of story. So when you're talking about growth, and anybody can measure that growth however they want to, but I think this win, just because of the measure of adversity that they had to deal with, was definitely monumental. And if ASU ends up having a better season than many expected them to have, this is definitely one contest you can point to end of November, beginning of December, as a game that really signaled what ASU achieved later on in the year.
Yeah, and once again, no better way to start out the year. 2-0 so far in non-conference play. A couple wrinkles down the stretch, as we talked about. But now ASU heading towards its final non-conference matchup. 5-day turnaround. A lot less rest going into this game on Thursday. Heading to Texas on the road. A team that's no slouch in its own right this season. What do you sort of expect to see out of that matchup?
Well, first of all, I think just like ASU did a good job of putting the Wyoming game in the rearview mirror as fast as possible, this definitely has to take place with, like you said, Justin, only a 5-day turnaround and a road game in Texas, facing Texas State. Maybe on paper in the beginning of the season we thought Texas State would be the easiest non-conference opponent for ASU. I'm not so sure after what I saw from Wyoming today and last week, for that matter. And it's a game on the road. I mean, we still, when you talk about the list of things we still don't know about this ASU team, how they're going to handle themselves on the road. I mean, sure, it's much better to enter a road game like this on a 5-day turnaround 2-0 rather than 1-1, let alone 0-2. But how ASU is able to handle success, which I think they did pretty well today. There's still another test that's waiting for them Thursday night in San Marcos. Obviously, passing game really needs to get off to a much better start and really have consistency all throughout 4 quarters. And the defense, how they handle all these injuries, especially in the interior of the defensive line, that's really going to be huge. I know when fall camp started, this defensive line, looked even deeper than a basketball team. But now with injury after injury, they definitely are going to be tested more and more. So really curious to see the defensive line in particular, how they can come and perform after 5 days, and again dealing with some significant injuries over there. But I think that ASU fans should be very proud of what they saw from ASU today. We thought it was going to be a nail biter. I was 1 point off in my prediction. I predicted 31-23. Maybe I looked like the fool in the first half and like a genius in the second half. But all jokes aside, I think that the fact that ASU was really able to show a lot of character in this victory, it is something that cannot be overstated, cannot be repeated enough. And as I mentioned, if ASU ends up having a much better year than all the experts predicted they're going to have, this is definitely one game you can point to that really signaling that turnaround everybody wanted from 2023 to 2024.
Well, ASU now gets set to head to San Marcos, Texas to close out its non-conference slate against Texas State. For all the coverage surrounding ASU football, go to DevilsDigest.com. Follow Devil's Digest on Twitter at Devil's Digest. My name's Justin Lester Tosa. That's publisher Hoder Bino. We'll talk to you guys next week.